I think it's safe to say Supergiant Games has established itself as one of the greatest game studios of the last decade. Whether you enjoy their work or not, it's difficult to argue against the impact they've made since releasing Bastion in 2011. Every Supergiant game brings with it innovation upon the genre or style it most closely belongs to, either through clever presentation, mechanical experimentation, or just a really good aesthetic. To say they changed the conversation around indie game studios and have been ahead of the industry curve since Transistor is an understatement. Having played all of their titles and following their continued work, as well as covering them on this channel, it's been inspiring to see them improve in some way with every project. It's also been fascinating to discover how similar every Supergiant game is to the last. This isn't meant to be an insult, in fact it's quite the opposite. I don't mean their games are homogenous, I mean they have the same conversation with their audience every few years. I've come to see every Supergiant game as a visit from an old friend who's been through hard times. We meet up after not seeing each other for however long, catch up about our goings-ons, and inevitably I'm updated on the situation. Though I've heard most of it before, we're both a lot older and a lot smarter with every visit, and how we feel about that conversation is a little bit different as the years go on. There's an observable growth within the Supergiant lineup, an increasing maturity with every knock at my door. Those gains in wisdom and their correlating success has to do with Supergiant Games constantly aiming to create something timeless. A modern classic in a space where those are severely lacking. Hades is that modern classic, both literally and figuratively, coincidentally. Or maybe not. Maybe they knew they were going to nail it this time, and the ancient Greek mythology paired with modern sensibilities was a completely intentional and very confident gambit on their part. Either way, Hades tackles what Supergiant tackles best: escape. Not escapism, escape. And this time, it feels like they've conquered it, both the theme and whatever inspired it in the first place. If you aren't familiar with Hades, it's a roguelite action game about Zagreus, the son of Hades, attempting to escape the underworld and seemingly the grasp of his father. Easier said than done, as in order to escape to the mortal world on the surface, he must also vanquish those tasked by the House of Hades with preventing the dead from leaving. The usual suspects from Greek mythology are there: the Furies, Hades, the Hydra, Achilles. Basically, if you've watched Disney's Hercules, you're good to go. With the help of others in the house, as well as a few kindred spirits along the way, Zagreus runs headfirst towards the surface. Gods don't die, so failing an escape attempt only brings him back to the house, where he can try again, and again, and again. The cyclical progression of Hades, starting a new run, getting as far as you can, and being brought back home again to begin anew, isn't a brand new concept for Supergiant Games, but it's the first time it's been used in an explicitly mechanical sense. The cycle of escape exists in all their work. Pyre utilizes the seasonal nature of sports to create tournament gameplay, with the winner of every championship able to select one of their players to escape from the land of purgatory. Transistor's ending reveals the eponymous tool has been used to create worlds upon worlds, infinitely cascading deeper and deeper within more and more transistors. In Bastion, the narrator experiences deja vu on subsequent playthroughs, hinting at the characters of the game being stuck inside a looping timeline, further reinforced when players learn about the Bastion itself's various functions and one of the game's endings. At the start of Hades, I'm most reminded of Bastion. As far as players know, Zagreus is attempting escape of a broken home with the help of his extended family, the gods on Mount Olympus. It isn't too dissimilar to the kid's escape of his own home, a crumbling world he can no longer live on. The first section of the underworld, Tartarus, has enemy types reminiscent of Bastion's early levels for this very reason. Much of those very early runs are callbacks to Supergiant's first game about escape, and reflecting their early attempt is Zagreus' relatively limited abilities during. In its first few hours, Hades shares much of Bastion's conversation about escape. A perpetual endeavor against what feels like a never-ending calamity. A painful departure from an unsalvageable place. That being said, it's important to note how Hades frames this message. Zagreus is introduced to us a bit juvenile and even naive. The game beginning at the start of our first run sets up Zagreus' escape as an impromptu one, and his dry wit characterizes him as a rash and sarcastic person. To me, it reads as though Supergiant is criticizing its initial view on its favorite subject matter, not totally dismissing it, but acknowledging it didn't have the whole picture. Information at the start of Hades is limited to us to help get this across, as well as sell the player on Zagreus' cause. We don't know why Zagreus is escaping, but we're skeptical of the people around him and choose to put our faith in him. After a few runs though, characters in Hades begin to interact with Zagreus more, and we learn he isn't alone in his efforts or his supposed suffering. The chthonic god Nyx is the one who puts him in contact with his Olympian relatives. Achilles is Zagreus' mentor and confidant, and Thanatos hides his assistance in the form of a sporting challenge. The House of Hades itself is divided on Zagreus' desires, with Hades making up most of the resistance and using his power to press others into stopping Zagreus. It's here where Hades begins to resemble Transistor, and where Transistor picks up the conversation Bastion ended on. Transistor, contrary to the initially lonely aesthetic, largely focuses on community, confrontation, and how escape can be hindered or encouraged by it. Much of Red's abilities are in fact the people of her city, stored like data within the Transistor, lending their talents to Red's mission of fighting the process and confronting the members of the Camerata. When the Camerata steal Red's voice and seal it into the Transistor, she's teleported away, but rather than escape from Cloudbank City, she sets her sights on fighting back. In a similar fashion, Zagreus is eventually able to give others precious nectar, and his thoughtful act is reciprocated with a trinket bestowing him an advantage during his escape attempts. As more runs are attempted, we learn more about his reasons for leaving the underworld and discover it's not merely to get away. In a flashback, Zagreus discovers Nyx isn't his mother, and his real mother left the underworld on poor terms with Hades. When he confronts Hades with his questions, he's met with anger and the usual oppressive demeanor his father employs. Without many other options, Zagreus becomes determined to reach the surface and find his mother. Both in Transistor and in Hades, the perspective on what escape means changes. For both Red and Zagreus, escape is a means to an end, a way of getting answers and at getting back at those who are robbing them of their agency. Once again, it pays to pay attention to how Hades frames this evolving perspective. Where Transistor sought less to sympathize or emotionally connect us to our villains, going so far as to have its final boss be someone void of empathy and obsessed with cold observation, Hades is abundant with emotional push and pull of its characters. Zagreus is not trying to stop his father in the same way Red is trying to stop the Camerata. Every nectar softens the tension between Zagreus and his rivals, and every failed escape attempt is yet another opportunity to learn about their vulnerabilities as people. Over the course of escape, we grow closer to the people surrounding us. We start to see the cracks in Hades' demeanor. We begin to suspect the people telling Zagreus his house is an awful wreck are, in reality, the source of much of the strife Hades himself possesses, and are to blame for much of the turmoil in his house. And like Zagreus, we realize the only way to get through to his father is to convince him to participate in that conversation. And the best way to do that is by proving his father wrong. Our main character is smarter and more compassionate than we originally believed. Hades frames confrontation as an act of love rather than vengeance. Together with the other chthonic gods, Zagreus is essentially preparing a massive intervention, one that starts when he finally succeeds in breaking out of the underworld and confronts his father on the surface. You'd think beating Hades and meeting Persephone would signal the end of the story, but it's only the beginning. Zagreus can't survive on the surface for long, so when he meets his mother, he's left with more questions. But Hades is stubborn and refuses to talk about Persephone in the house, thus forcing Zagreus to continue his escape attempts, both to speak to his mother and force his father to answer his questions. By now, Hades has taken an unexpected turn. We've begun decorating the house with the spoils of our escapes. We've grown much closer to family and friends and have learned a great deal about what makes them who they are. Hades is no longer a villain and comes across as more of an unfortunate casualty of a problematic family. We've reached the part of Hades paralleling Pyre the most. Once again, Pyre is about escaping the purgatory we've been dropped in, but develops into a more complicated discussion of selflessness versus survival. With every championship, the odds of the exiled escaping the world below grow slimmer, and as the story develops, it becomes increasingly important to choose who leaves for the surface wisely. But like in Hades, the world below, while initially characterized as inhospitable and full of suffering, eventually turns out to be comforting for some and even preferred by others. In the same way we decorate the house, the wagon we travel with in Pyre is adorned with personal trophies, sentimental belongings of the ragtag family we form, and even our very own house pet. We become comfortable in our surroundings, and our reasons for winning the championship and being granted the opportunity for escape change. We begin to prioritize a different goal that would lead to a better outcome for as many people as possible. We realize sometimes a broken home is still our home. Sometimes it isn't as broken as we once thought. For Zagreus, escape goes from meaning being rid of his father to saving his parents' marriage. From believing his father is irredeemable to realizing his father is just as much a prisoner in his own house as his son is. From feeling trapped within the house of Hades to making the house his own. Again, Hades frames this shift in Zagreus' goal as well as his growth as a person without the ultimatum Pyre does. Without the limitation of time or patience. Without saying one has to sacrifice their own well-being or personal desires to do so. And much like in Pyre, where helping the right people escape improves the lives of many, so too does Zagreus' escape help others. His gifts, his improvements to the house, rekindling the connections between his friends, and above all, giving his father the opportunity to communicate with Persephone through him, and the chance to get out. Because when Zagreus escapes, Hades escapes. It signals not only a maturity in the protagonist of their story, but also a maturity in Supergiant's perspective. Hades never ends. The credits roll only marks another point in time for the ever-changing relationship Zagreus has with his environment. His escape attempts reveal flaws in underworld security, but what's really being exposed are the flaws in his relationship with his father. Fighting each other to the death turns out to be a great form of group therapy. Every run towards reaching Hades' epilogue is working towards a better future. All the while, Zagreus continues to grow as a person. This growth is what makes Hades so special. Whereas their previous games were isolated moments in time, flashbangs of how they viewed the situation, Hades is Supergiant looking in the mirror, a chronicle of who they were, where they were going, and where they are now. A combination of their previous games' aesthetics, their mechanics and depth, of their developed understanding of the feelings each was made with, even down to the smallest details, like the way every run in Hades starts by jumping out of a window. What's dressed as a story about abusive households, terse relationships with parents, and the cyclical nature of abuse helps push players towards a nuanced discussion about what escaping that kind of environment means as one gets older. Whether you need to get away from what troubles you, need to face it dead on before you can move on, or aren't willing to give up on a person you care about. With Hades, Supergiant Games has provided solace for those searching for it, and they will continue to be a source of inspiration for those in need of that kind of wisdom. They aren't just good at it. They aren't just specialized. They own it. Supergiant Games is the house of escape.